Good morning. Please excuse our delay this morning. I'd like to say that the organizers have said that we will postpone the commencement of today's session for half an hour. So we won't have our pause for coffee until half an hour later than scheduled. I'd like to say that my name is Tonio Poveda. I am the coordinator of the Spanish organization of HIV AIDS. We have 70 different entities within Spain encompassed in our organization under the umbrella of it. And there's another important number of organizations in addition that are GLBT, who work with different populations and members of the communities. This allows our entity to be very enriched in diversity. And since this is World Pride time, and this is the World Conference on Human Rights, and here we're talking about HIV and AIDS, I'd like to congratulate everyone for Gay Pride. The 28th of June is the 47th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of Stonewall. I wouldn't like to extend myself too much now. We'll begin with a documentary film by a person I will introduce later. He has lived practically the entire history of the LGBT movement in Spain, and much of his life has been he spent suffering HIV. We'll talk about the different stigma that a person with HIV has to live with. This is a documentary for Ayos Cabrera, and now we'll begin.
Me llamo Quique Poveda, nací en Alicante en el año 1954, o sea que ahora tengo 50 años. Mido 1,72 y peso 83 kilos. Soy seropositivo desde que tenía 26 años. Soy activista gay desde hace mucho tiempo. Empecé en Murcia cuando tenía 18 años, en uno de los frentes de liberación homosexual. Entonces estaba estudiando medicina. Luego me enganché a la heroína y dejé el frente y también la medicina. Por aquella época era militante del Partido Comunista, pero me echaron por maltón, a mí y a mi amigo José Miguel. Queríamos llevar a un congreso una ponencia sobre liberación sexual. Nos llamó a su despacho el secretario regional del Partido de Murcia y nos echó. He estado en el Talego varias veces por robo a farmacias. En las farmacias antiguas había buen material. Robábamos una cocaína y una morfina de muy buena calidad. El opio estaba regular. También robábamos muchas anfetaminas. Bustais, masivamatos, rinomales, sidrinas, centraminas y milips. Todo aquello que pillábamos estaba muy bueno, sin cortar y sobre todo muy orgánico. Pero al final la jodimos y nos pillaron en un par de ocasiones. Lo reconozco, he pasado muy buenos ratos con las drogas. Bajo sus efectos he pensado, he bailado y he follado muchísimo. Los chutes de coca te ponen brillante, las mezclas eran muy divertidas. El speed y las anfetas me daban una capacidad de pensar que solo se puede tener si vas puesto. La mezcla de heroína y cocaína es especial, sobre todo si te la inyectas. A la brillantez mental de la coca y a su excitación tienes que sumarle la paz que te da el caballo. Desaparecen los problemas, todo es fácil. En el rollo yonki he sido rechazado por maricón. Todo el mundo sabía que Paquito era mi novio. Entre maricones he sido rechazado por ladrón, por yonki, por ser positivo. También he sido discriminado porque, aun siendo bastante masculino, me gusta que me inculen. Y eso también estigmatiza, incluso en el mundo gay. Cuando me infecté con el VIH era muy joven. En el 86 apenas se hablaba de SIDA. Me jodieron la vida. Tiraban los cubiertos, la gente no quería follar conmigo, no quería compartir jeringuillas, hicieron pintadas en la puerta, los médicos no querían operarme las ranas. Algunas personas me retiraban la palabra. Ya me quedé muerta cuando un cirujano me dijo que no podía follar en la vida. La primera vez que intenté suicidarme fue cuando tenía 21 años. Paquito y yo estábamos en la cárcel, en módulos diferentes. Pensamos en cortarnos las venas, pero la enfermería estaba llena y nos reportaron de nuevo a nuestros módulos. Tengo la cara llena de marcas de unos hongos que me metí por vena con un chute en mal estado. Un día, en el cine, viendo la emisión, la fiebre se subió. Día tras día, la cabeza se me fue echando, bultos de pus, y finalmente directo al hospital. Las cándidas entraban en mi vena hasta lo cuanto acabé. Me gusta vestirme de Red King, o de King Gay, como quieras llamarlo. Tenía un perrito pitbull, se llamaba Bonito, pero como los perros tienen que tener un nombre corto para que se enteren del cuerpo, lo llamábamos Zumo. Era muy listo, se tiraba los pedos en la terraza. La gente cuando se cruzaba con nosotros en la calle se asustaba y me exigía que le pusiera cruzar. Hoy Hugo, bueno, sus cenizas, están en la bahía de Bangalore, en Irlanda del Norte. Allí hay un mar muy grande y espero que lo pase bien en compañía de los héroes republicanos que también descansan aquí. Tengo hepatitis C y según algunos médicos me ha producido cirrosis. Según otros tendría que esperar a ver si tengo varices esofágica. En el caso que tengo un basilote parece que estoy preñado. El infectólogo me quiere tratar a partir de hoy con interferón girado y ribavirina. Y por lo que sé el tratamiento sienta fatal. Como veis, he tenido muchos problemas de salud, pero se me complicaron las cosas cuando enfermé de la boca y del culo. En la boca tenía condilomas y en el ojete condilomas y además una displasia. Supuraba todos los días, iba siempre con una columna de gasa para no manchar los gallumbos ni los pantalones. Tenía un dolor muy fuerte y los perros se acercaban curiosos a verme. En el Hospital Universitario de Alicante, como en otras muchas ciudades, no tenían ni puta idea de cómo tratar esto del virus del papiloma humano. Así que tuve que pedir dinero a mi madre y exiliarme a Badalona, a un hospital al que llaman Cantuti, pero que se llama Germás, Ries y Puyol. Tenía que ir todas las semanas, tantos aviones y tantos trenes me causaban mucho estrés y sufrimiento. El único que pensaba era en el suicidio y finalmente me suicidé en Europa. Un soleado día de febrero, tras 2 operaciones de ajo y una de boca, saqué a pasear a Hugo, y al llegar a casa introduje todas las pastillas que tenía en la batidora, las trituré y me las tragué profundamente. Pero la cosa no salió como yo pretendía. Como no cogía el teléfono fijo, ni el móvil, ni contestaba los mails, ni el telefonillo, ni respondía a los MSS, vinieron a casa 2 colegas que estaban espiando por si algo iba mal. Efectivamente, la sospecha estaba justificada. Me encontraban allí, desparramado junto a la cama, en el suelo. Bueno, ahora me he diagnosticado un trastorno bipolar. Y con este trastorno, en una fase maníaca, me tiré a Marrakech. De allí viajé a Londres con idea de quedarme, pero me gasté la pasta que llevaba pasando los fines de semana entre Belfast y París. Ropa, hombres, billetes, cuadros, masones, gasté toda la pasta. Acabé con una depresión que no me dejaba salir de la cama y vinieron a buscarme. Vino mi hermana y me llevó de vuelta a casa. En las fases maníacas he pasado los días más felices de mi vida y he echado los mejores trucos. Soy diabético, tomo muchas pastillas. Por la mañana tomo 3 para la depresión, con un estabilizador del ánimo y una más para el azúcar. Al mediodía tomo 3 para el VIH. Por la noche ni te cuento. 1,5 del estabilizador del ánimo, otro antidepresivo diferente a los 3 de la mañana, 2 pastillas y media para dormir y un pastillón para la tos, y una de la vitamina para el trastorno bipolar. A partir de hoy tendré que tomar 3 de ribavirina en el desayuno y 3 de ribavirina con la cena, y un pinchazo de interferón todos los días. Además, soy fumador, me fumo entre 50 y 60 cigarrillos diarios. En la actualidad estoy viviendo en Madrid y hace muchos años que dejé la heroína y la dictadura. Esta noche empezaré a inyectarme el interferón y los controles me los haré en el hospital para mi casa. La verdad es que me da muy mal rollo empezar el tratamiento. Dicen que para muchos es como pasar una gripe de un año. También tiene como efectos secundarios la depresión y los intentos de suicidio. Ahora, esperando, he hecho mucho de menos la heroína, pero no podría aguantar los malos rollos de ser junkie. Dicen que esto de ser junkie no se cura en la vida. De todas maneras, los reyes están buenos, ¿sí?
Sí, alguien tenía que yo no me entero. Yo no llevaba ese pinchar la boca de la gente.
Hitler nos lo ponía a nosotros. Hace más de 15 años que retomé el activismo y me hice activista también en temas de VIH-Sida. De ahí este ejercicio de visibilidad. Creo en la ecuación visibilidad igual a vida. Te cuento todo esto porque al contarlo me siento vivo. Mi vida está llena de huellas, de estigmas, de vida. Supongo que tú también tienes tus marcas. Los estigmas se perciben cuando tiran de tu vida.
Bueno, ahora si nos pueden dar...
Well, now if you could please give us some light. As I said, this short documentary, we've got the protagonist here with us, Quique Poveda. Quique Poveda is a very dear friend, colleague of the struggle, and furthermore, if he's here at this conference, it's thanks to his work in September of 2016 when he heard that there would be a conference on human rights for LGBT. He decided that he would be here and we'd have to deal with HIV in a special way. He will come up now. I would ask for a big applause for him because he's going to answer questions after our debate about the documentary, but I think we need to give him a big applause because he came up with the idea of this conference that has become a reality.
Y ahora pediría al resto de ponentes que también subieran.
And I would also like to ask the other speakers to please come up, the rest of the panel.
Bueno, yo antes de empezar sí que me gustaría
Before starting, I would first like to reflect upon something. I think this panel is especially important. We're going to understand through them the reality of many different countries and places in the world. I believe that this conference that's within the scope of the summit is very important. In my opinion, within the group, the LGBT group, we have important challenges, many, but the largest challenge, in my opinion, especially for gay and transsexual men and women, is the HIV challenge. About the scientific community is making big progress in treatment, in research. However, there is another reality that is called inequality, discrimination of all sorts, and it's very painful. I would like to make this clear that the big multinational corporations continue oftentimes with impossibly high prices that make it impossible for these new medical advances to reach the rest of the population. And lastly, we've got stigma. I won't go into that too much because we will have Maria Jose Fuster later talking about that. But I will turn the floor over first to, let's see if I can see the Sherry Kazi. He is a researcher and an activist of HIV AIDS in Pakistan. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about analysis of HIV situation amongst MSM and transgenders in Pakistan. So this is how I'm going to go through my presentation. I'm going to tell a little bit about legal and cultural barriers that are present in Pakistan and the HIV situation, the community-based organizations, and research that I conducted myself amongst MSMs and transgenders. And then we will conclude. So just a little bit about Pakistan. It is actually an Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and we have two set of laws that are present in Pakistan. One is Sharia law, and the other is Anglo-Saxon law. So actually, both these laws are here. They prosecute LGBT community and the sexual practices. In the Sharia law, even though it's not massively practiced in Pakistan, in some areas of Pakistan, like the north of Pakistan, it is still being used to harass and prosecute same-sex activities. So like in the Sharia law, you have a penalty which could be like 100 lashes if you are found having same-sex behavior, or you can also be stoned to death. Um, but I have to say that so far the only cases that we've seen in the north is like people in this who practice the same sex are usually lashed. People who are married to a woman and then they still have sex with men, and if they are caught, then they are given a severe punishment. There's also this section 377 that we inherited from the colonial era, in which people can be sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment. But I also have to say that this law is still being used by the law enforcement agencies to harass the LGBT community if they are caught having sex. If you ever come to Pakistan, you notice that there's this huge segregation of genders. You'd see that in the bus, there's a female section and then there's a male section. And so there's this whole segregation of sexes, genders. And so there's a lot of homo-affectionate, or some people call it homo-ignorant environment. So two men can get away with holding hands or hugging each other or even kissing each other on the cheek, and no one would think that that's considered as homosexual. It's just considered as a brotherly love. So there's a small space where the LGBT community can relax, but then again, if they're caught having sex, then they could be prosecuted, and there are some severe punishments that are present in our books. As far as LGBT rights are concerned, I have to say that the transgender people have recently gained recognition, and we actually have the third gender option on our passports. And there's also a lot of transgenders who ran for election to become the parliamentarians in 2012. So there is a lot of progress when it comes to transgenders. The transgender community, who are historically known as hijras, they are also found in India and Bangladesh. So this community has formed their own language, they have their own economical system, and they have their own culture. So they've also made family within the transgender network. So transgender community are sort of, you don't, usually they have this whole structure, and people usually, if they mess with them, then the whole community comes together and then they get back to them. So transgender community actually have a lot of rights when it comes to Pakistan. But the lesbians, when I talk about transgenders, I mean trans women, not trans men. Trans men are highly suppressed, and the lesbians are most suppressed in Pakistan because the genders are segregated, and usually the society forms this whole network of protection or suppression on women, and usually they don't it's just very suppressing for a woman. With the gay people, it's, like I said, it's a homo-affectionate environment. Like me and my boyfriend, we live together in Islamabad. We've been living together for the past 5 years, and people just don't think about it. They just think that it's just brothers living together. So just a small space. So there isn't a lot of movement for LGBT rights in Pakistan. There was a gay pride that was arranged by US Embassy in 2013. But what happened was, right after the pride that happened within the premises of the embassy, the news was leaked, and there were massive protests on the streets that this is a Western agenda, this is a Western disease that is being enforced on our innocent people. So there were these protests that happened against the gays and lesbian people. If I talk about HIV situation in Pakistan, it is a concentrated epidemic. It has not been spilled to the general population. The most HIV positive cases are found in injecting drug users. The prevalence goes all the way to 40%. And there is a data available for hijra sex workers, which are also transgender sex workers and male sex workers. For a very long time, we've been trying to advocate for inclusion of MSM population in the government setting, so that research can be done and more data can be gathered for MSM populations. But for a very long time, the government said there are no MSM populations in Pakistan. There are only male sex workers. People don't have sex with men because they desire sex. It's because they have the financial needs for it. But then we advocated, the organizations that are locally working there, they advocated for it. And now recently, the government have published a report where they've actually accepted that there are MSM population present and they don't have the data. So right now, in 2017, they've done this research that also gathers the data on HIV prevalence amongst MSM, but this data is not available yet. This is a projection that was also made from the National and Provincial AIDS Control Program. So they've actually not only acknowledged that there's MSM population present in Pakistan, they also have projected that in the future, MSM population is going to be the most vulnerable, and in the next few years, MSM, there will be more intense cases of MSM population, and the prevalence is going to increase amongst MSM population and the transgender people. So usually when people talk about transgender and HIV, then they consider them as sex workers, but the government still has hard time acknowledging that people actually have sex because they desire sex. So even within the transgender paradigm, they think that it's all sex work, and people need money, that's why they have sex. So, but still, there is some change. Government is actually taking a stance that there can be transgenders and MSMs who would have sex with other men and women just because they desire having sex. These are the pictures of some of the community-based organizations. These were formed with the support of Global Fund. I've actually done a research in collaboration with these organizations, and I gathered some data which actually helps me build a little bit foundation for more research when it comes to MSM vulnerability and transgender vulnerability. So I gathered the data from all these 6 organizations, and I made this treatment cascade that why is the adherence so low amongst HIV positive people? Why they don't adhere to ARTs? And so I gathered the data from these 6 organizations, and there were around 450 HIV positive people, but as you can see that a lot of people, they would not register, and then they would not continue the ARTs. So the government says that the figures of, there are around 100,000 HIV positive people living in Pakistan. But they also acknowledge that a lot of them, they don't get tested, because the only reason why you get tested for HIV is when you have a surgical operation, and that's about it. You don't get tested. So the only data that they could gather was from a little bit organizations that are working and the people who got their surgeries done. So there's a lot of other people in Pakistan, but their data is missing because they don't get tested for HIV. And if they get tested for HIV, then they just don't register in the government treatment centers. For the MSM and transgender population, I did a research with 100 HIV positive. I did an interview with 100 HIV positive MSM and transgender people. So this actually helped me understand that why was adherence low within these 2 particular populations. So this was a research that I did with 100 HIV positive MSM and transgender people, just to understand that why the reasons for adherence to ARTs was so low, and what were the challenges that MSM and trans population was facing while accessing treatment services. So, okay, so one of the findings about my research was that people who are younger, this is something that is, I think, something that we all face or feel, understand, is the people who are the youngest, they are most out of care. They don't adhere to treatment, they don't adhere to ARTs. So as you age further along, you adhere more to treatment. So this, within the MSM and transgender people, I found the same dynamics. Literacy was also one of the factors. People who were not educated at all, they were most out of care, and as you progressed, people who were most educated, they were more in care. People who made money which was like more than 10,000 rupees, which is equal to, I guess, 100 euros a month. They adhered to treatment. So finances also mattered a lot to make ensure that people adhere to treatment. Relationship status also mattered a lot. People who were married, they adhered more to treatment than people who were single and were not seeing anyone. So one of the findings that I found was that people who were involved in sex work, they were most out of care, and people who were not into sex work, they were in care. So, and another dynamics that I found that most of the people who were less than 30 years old, they were more into sex work. So you can see that the young people in Pakistan, they were more on risk when it comes to, you know, contracting further HIV or not saving themselves from further harm or infections. So this is also a graph of people. As you age, you get more into in-care and the blue graph. And so as you age, you get more in-care and if you're younger, so you're just most out of care. This is what I said earlier, that people who were youngest, they were more involved in sex work. So when I asked them if they had any knowledge on HIV before they got tested for HIV, they said 65% said that when they got tested, they had no knowledge of HIV. So this also shows that there's a huge gap within the whole system, that there needs to be more education, there needs to be more educational material provided from the government, how to save themselves from further harm. So I asked a lot of them that were you satisfied with the way the confidentiality was maintained at the treatment centers, and they said yes. But when I went to treatment center myself, I saw this small room where there were like hundreds of HIV positive people all clustered together, and everyone knew about everyone else. So the whole perception of what confidentiality actually means is something different for the people in Pakistan. They don't understand that if you are forced to sit with 100 other HIV positive people, your confidentiality is maintained, but it is not. So even though the survey said there's a lot of satisfaction when it comes to confidentiality, it wasn't. Another research that I did with IDLO, I interviewed 100 transgender people, and I asked them, have you ever felt violated about your rights? And around 70–80% said, no, we are all fine. There was never an incident where our rights were violated. And then I asked them, have you ever been raped? And then 70% of them would say yes. And I would ask them, have you ever been harassed by police? And then 70–80% would say yes. So it's just an understanding of what your rights are, what confidentiality is mean is something different and alien for people in Pakistan. A lot of people did not know their CD4. The treatment center staff did not ensure that people would know that what CD4 is and how important it is for them to understand their CD4. So a lot of people did not even know what their CD4 was. There was people who were out of care, they were more into drug use, and people who were in care, they did not use drug, and people who were out of care, they would use drug. So the conclusion was that the treatment center staff is very rude, they are very impolite, they don't know how to talk to people who come to them for help. So there's a lot of need for the capacity building of the treatment staff who are working at the government treatment centers. There needs to be a youth-centric policy so that the youth who are most vulnerable, they need more support and more attention and more resources. More service delivery centers are needed. I mean, personally, I saw a young boy once sitting in a station of a small city. He was sitting outside the brothel. So there are actually male brothels in Pakistan instead of female brothels. It's just easier for the management to make sure that the boys are present there instead of women. So you go to them and you have sex with any boy for 50 cents or half a euro. And usually these boys are very young, like young as 13 or 14 years old. I saw this very young boy who was sitting outside a brothel, and he had yeast infection all over his mouth, and he could not even talk. Even though I could speak the local language there, I asked him, how are you? And then he just took out this slip, which said that he was HIV positive and he needs to go to Karachi, which is like Barcelona from here. So I said, how are you going to go? And then he could not respond. And he could not even talk because there was severe yeast infection in his mouth. So, I mean, if there was a treatment center available in that city, probably he would not have to go all the way to Karachi. But there wasn't any treatment center, so it was just so sad. And there are needs for better ARTs regime, because the ART regime that we have severe side effects and people usually just discontinue. And there is a need to education population of HIV/AIDS, and there is need for nutritional support and better measures to protect the confidentiality. This is pictures of some of the field staff that is working within the organizations there. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Yo creo que nos ha hecho una gran radiografía de la situación que se vive en Pakistán. El siguiente ponente es Kiken Daryan. Él es coordinador y consultor de la red de trabajo Armenia en positivo. Gracias.
Hello everybody. I know my name is a bit difficult to pronounce, so it is actually Viken Darakcan. Armenia is a country that I suppose 20% of you know where it is, what it presents of itself, and that's why I'm going to start giving a brief history about the country, which actually reflects the situation of LGBT people in Armenia. Armenia was the first country in the world who adopted Christianity as the official religion, and thus religion and the church plays quite a strong role in the day-to-day life. It's a monoracial country, which means any Armenian marrying a non-Armenian is quite a not encouraged situation, let's put it this way. And children are raised up to encourage the race, which means they have to grow up, they have to get married, they have to have children. So anything that goes against that part is actually not acceptable. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the HIV situation in Armenia in general, and then I'll speak about whatever is relevant to the LGBT section. So, general information from 1988 till May 2017, 2,701 HIV cases have been registered in the country. Males 69%, females 31%. Usually the main route of HIV transmission in Armenia is through the migration. The male population go to Russia to work, seasonal migration, and they come back, in most cases, HIV positive, and not knowing they infect their women. 1407 were late presenters. Why? Because HIV is still a big taboo, even during the occasions where we do free testings in the city, when we approach the passerbys and tell them you can have a rapid test, it's for free, you can have your HIV status, and in case we give them all the counseling, the pre and post testing, still they are really hesitant in taking the test because they're saying, no, 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 no. What if I get tested positive? People would know, and then what? So there's that fear of even getting tested. That's why usually it's late presenters when they are already with CD4 counts of 2. 1308 are currently on ART. We were starting at 500 CD4, but soon we will start providing ART to all HIV positive people. 52% belong to 25 to 39 years old, and the HIV/AIDS situation assessment shows that there should be around 3,600 to 4,000 HIV positive people in Armenia. As you can see, the number of people on therapy keeps increasing year by year. And there's the allocation. Heterosexual is 67% and homosexual is 3, unknown 4. Now, when it says heterosexual 67%, that does not mean that they are really heterosexuals, because most people living with HIV, they are scared to disclose their sexuality to the doctors, so they either prefer to say that transmission route was heterosexual, or they just remain anonymous, like not knowing where they got the infection from, so they go into the unknown section. So part of that 67 should be, at least 10% of that should be homosexual as well. Some good stuff. World Health Organization has been working in Armenia since 2010, and last year in June, together with Belarus and Moldova, we got a certificate of eliminating vertical transmission of HIV. Now, how did we do that? As you can see, early universal access. Basically, all pregnant women, they get tested during the pregnancy, and in case they get tested positive, they do the needful. And since 2006, we have not had a vertical transmission case. Now, who's funding all that? It's a small country with limited resources. So far, thanks to the Global Fund, they're taking care of the antiretroviral treatment, HIV prevention among key populations, and methadone substitution therapy. Now, that program is going to end in, well, it was supposed to already ended, but they've extended for one more phase. Now, after that, the Ministry of Health wants to take over the expenses of the treatment. However, when we compare what's happening with diabetic people who get their treatment from the ministry for free, and all the times that there were no medication available in town, basically that is not a good omen of what might happen when they take over the HIV treatment as well. Sorry, it's quite an old data, 2015, but as you can see, 4,560,477 USD have been spent, mostly from, as you can see, Global Fund. The state budget has some kind of contribution to it as well. International, basically mostly Russia, where they have donated 4 mobile clinics, which we use for on-the-spot testing during certain occasions. Just general information of the ART, which is almost 95% generic. Now, is HIV testing for free? Yes, it is, but for citizens of the Republic of Armenia. If you are a tourist or anybody else living there, then you have to pay. We, as community-based organizations, are still not allowed to do any community-based screening. Any organization that is able to do that must have a complete equipped laboratory with doctors and clinics, nurses. So far that's the law, but we're working on changing it. Is there a law protecting people living with HIV? Yes, there is. Is there a law actually against LGBT people? No, there isn't. However, that does not reflect the reality. The law might not say anything against it. However, the cultural norms play a stronger role than the laws. Is there free access? Yes. To treatment, basically we all get ART for free. As I said, the restriction is for people who are not citizens of Armenia. We do have PEP, however, nobody's even talking about PrEP because right now we are still concentrating on the phase after the Global Fund to make sure that the medication actually will be continuous. So once we ensure that that is happening, then we will start concentrating on the PrEP issue. We have harm reduction, and yes, we have it in prisons as well. Unlike many European countries, we have OST, opioid substitution therapy, and needle syringe programs. Now, the reality. All people have the same rights. However, most people living with HIV, regardless if they are representatives of LGBT society or community or not, they do face the stigma and discrimination. We've had many cases where a child of a person living with HIV was not allowed in the kindergarten because of the mother's status. We had people getting fired from their work because the boss found out that their employee is HIV positive. And many dentists basically are hesitant in working with a patient who is HIV positive, not to mention the big medical centers where we always have to go and fight for the rights of our beneficiaries. Why is that happening? Lack of knowledge. It's not really lack. We've been doing so many events to raise awareness. However, the thing that's coming from the Soviet times is still stuck in people's mentality, which means HIV, bad behavior, death against God. So that's the circle that we're trying to break, and it's not an easy circle to break. Stereotypes is basically, they say if you're HIV positive, then you're either a sex worker or you're gay or drug user. All three things are not considered good things in the Armenian society. Now, before going to my organization, a bit of more information about the LGBT situation. We had one cafe where the owner was a lesbian, and the cafe got burned down, and it was on the news, and there were, well, almost most of the parliamentarians and the church officials were actually encouraging what happened, saying that, yes, this is how things that are against God should be treated. So many people, when they come out to their families, they either disappear, which means nobody knows what happens with them, or there are certain occasions when the parents are a bit open-minded that they accept them, but the majority cases end up in a bad situation. We put posters 2 months ago, just like transgenders are part of the society as well. Get over it, basically. And the next day, they were torn down everywhere. And of course, nobody knew who did that, but anybody could have done that. Basically, the public is strictly against anything to do with LGBT, not to mention LGBT plus HIV. There are many organizations working toward changing that, and one of them is my organization, which is Post of People Armenian Network. We were established in 2016, and we are providing care and support to people living with HIV, regardless if they are LGBT or injection drug users, and it's a financial support of Global Fund. Our goals to improve quality of people living with HIV, basically we concentrate on hepatitis, HIV, and tuberculosis. We try to change the stereotypes in the community, and I remember one of the researches that we did, and the person that I was asking in one of the villages, I said, would you know if somebody is HIV positive? He said, yes, of course I would know. My neighbor is HIV positive. And that coming out of a village, I was not really sure if I should trust that information. So I was like, how do you know your neighbor is HIV positive? It was like, oh, the ambulance comes every day. His skin is coming out of his flesh and this and that. I was like, oh, so that's how you know somebody's HIV. We're trying to change that and make them understand that a normal looking person actually could be HIV positive. I will not go into details to prevent the spread of HIV, to prevent drug abuse and STIs. This is the spheres that we work: LGBT, TB, HCV, HIV, human rights, care and support, raising awareness and training seminars, and most importantly, advocacy. We provide psychological support, especially to LGBT people who have just came out to their parents. Another organization has opened kind of a house where, well, 99% of the cases they get kicked out of the house, so at least they would have somewhere to live. And they need psychological support doing that. Mutual support groups for people living with HIV, protection of rights. Am I okay, or am I too fast? I just realized. With the translators. Okay. Where was it? Accessibility of medical services, social support. The social comes mostly when and the human rights in those cases where we have to go and fight with the management of the school, the dentist, the hospital, telling them that they have to do the surgery or they have to accept the child, because we will basically sue them. There is no law against people living with HIV. We do trainings to increase the involvement of the key populations, because even themselves, people living with HIV, LGBT, they rarely voice up their concerns. They rarely express their needs in the public because they don't want to be known by the rest of the community. So everything is happening underground, and the organizations are speaking on their behalf. Assisting in distribution process of ART. That's an interesting thing, because it's distributed from the capital only, and most people from the regions are in a bad financial situation, so they cannot actually afford to come to the capital and get the treatment. So we do actually take it from the National Center of AIDS Prevention, and we send it to them for free. These are a few of the campaigns that we do every year. The Candlelight Memorial. There was one incident 2 years ago where we and 2 more NGOs, just like 10 people, I can't remember what day was it, but we held a rainbow flag in one of the main avenues there and took a picture and just posted it on Facebook. The reaction that we received was quite interesting. We got bombarded for the next probably 6 months, and threats of violence, threats of this, and like in the news, these people are gay. They're advertising gay rights in the middle of the city. How could they? 3 years before that, there was another kind of a parade, which was for diversity, which prominent group of Armenian nationals thought that, ooh, diversity could be LGBT rights, maybe it's pride. So they actually attacked the participants, and the participants had to run away. Yeah, basically this is just proof of the trainings and all that. And these are the other NGOs working with LGBT rights, a new generation, public information in need of knowledge, and right side. Of course, none of them is registered as officially LGBT rights defenders because it would be quite interesting for somebody to find their details in the yellow pages, let's put it this way, especially the group of the Armenian really right side nationalists. So there's not even a sign or anything in front of the NGOs usually. That's it. I mean, I can speak for much longer, but I don't want to take more of the other colleagues' time. So if you have any questions, I can answer it later on.
Bueno, ahora, perdón, el siguiente ponente es Víctor.
Well, the next speaker is Victor Hugo Robles. He is a journalist, editor, and a gay activist. He's well known in South America, especially in his country, Chile. They call him El Che Guevara de los gay rights.
Buenos días.
Good morning. More than famous, I would say I'm famous, feminine figure. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, all the Cogam colleagues, for opening this space and for being so resistant and insistent. Thank you, Juan Fernandez, for suggesting my name for this panel. In my case, I'm not going to talk about statistics because I am uncomfortable with statistics. I really prefer political processes, life biographies of struggles. But there are some statistics. I'd also like to appreciate or thank my colleagues for having shared the history of Enrique Poveda, a very difficult but yet very intimate and political story. And this documentary talks of stigmas that are empowering social struggle. And we have to recognize this. And we also have our own stigma, the stigma of obsession, of insistence and persistence. Otherwise, we would not be here at this LGTB conference and HIV positive conference here, and we wouldn't be participating in Gay Pride. We wouldn't see it looking so good today. Now I will read two texts that are part of my book, the Diary of the Gay Che, which talks about the relationships with the movement, LGTB movement and AIDS. And we've seen this in a parallel conference on human rights that looks very unstigmatized without HIV. And then we have this conference that's a little bit swept under the rug and hidden here at the Autonomous University of Madrid. I'll show you a photograph that is quite stigmatizing. The condom, this is a campaign where it says a gay Chilean died of cancer. I'd like to share some crazy ideas with you, but because they're crazy, that doesn't mean they're less just, fair, interesting. I am a non-believer, and I formally renounced my Catholic religion. I'm proud to say that. I did it on a Gay Pride Day in a very Catholic country such as Chile. And that church was opposed to the free independent campaign against AIDS. I collaborate and am part of the MUMS movement, which is about sexual diversity, founded more than 20 years ago. I was also a coordinator as a journalist of the magazine called Vivo Positivo, and I speak from my condition of a person infected by the virus. As once a health official in Chile called us a scourge, and she said they needed to fight against the scourge of our group. She didn't realize she was surrounded by political scourges that didn't share her bias. In the same way, we don't question how HIV has been treated by the authorities, such as this minister I just mentioned. Particularly, gay men are treated poorly, and we have to say that HIV has always been a polemic issue, with a lot of tension. And I'd like to talk about a little history of the struggle in Chile. The oldest group, Móvil, came about on June 28th, 1991, by a historical group of people who we owe very much to. They raised their voices and organized us to prevent this evil, as the press calls it. Our friends within this group called Acción Gay organized the group and social responses for our community. On June 28th, they held a meeting to commemorate Stonewall in the U.S. in 1969. So then a group of gays from that meeting decided to found a political group of homosexuals to fight for civil rights, social rights, political rights, and cultural rights. And there was no agreement between the parties, among the parties, and Móvil had to step down from the organization. Some say they were expelled, others say they just retired or stepped down. It's something that we really will never know. But Móvil set up their own site and their own agenda, and after a short time, the same problems arose again regarding whether or not HIV and AIDS should be taken on as a political fight by homosexuals. There was a conservative sector in our group led by Roland Jimenez, and it seems like he was afraid of it being associated with homosexuality being associated with HIV positive and AIDS. There were other more radical persons, among which I include myself, and we wanted to have a seduction strategy that would bring in HIV positive and AIDS into our public fight. And because we had great reason to, especially considering all of those among our ranks who had died of the disease. In many countries, especially the U.S., we've seen that HIV and AIDS have always been an efficient tool in giving power to the homosexual community. Finally, the conservative sector and the persons looking to work with HIV and AIDS left, and we had another break in our group. Roberto Pablo and Luis Cartier came about, and then we had members dying up to now. HIV/AIDS continues to be a controversial matter within our organizations and an invisible concern. One might say, why, after so many years, 30 years since the first appearance of someone of us who was seropositive, are things the way they are? That patient, Edmund Gonzalez, was a homosexual professor in Maipú who died of AIDS. And Savia, our organization, we did research on the community story of HIV and AIDS in Chile, and we realized that there was really a pandemic. This year, we've seen another zero patient, trans patients, but since this was a trans person, it was not allowed to be said that it was the first. Our group of diverse persons, I'm sorry, he's just reading and it's difficult to follow. But the AIDS group, it's like they think we want to be brides dressed in white and not conform in any way to society. I need to go slower because I'm reading very fast, they say. Well, today, gays, we also talk about the fight for abortion, and one asks, why are official gays not really behind these other struggles? After so many years of HIV, we see it still quite alive, and sometimes it's visible, other times it's invisible in political debate. But my own story, what is it? Well, I resist, I struggle, and I fight. My relationship with the virus started in November of '82 when I went for the first time to get tested. And this was in Conchalí, a poor commune in Santiago, the north part of the city. And there was a paper called La Comuna, and a journalist, Maxi Fuentes, who was the creator of the valuable information. I became his friend. We talked about militancy and the social fight and cultural fight for of homosexuals. Afterwards, we continued meeting, and this was very important for me to when I was diagnosed as seropositive. And since June the 3rd, 1994, and this is the statistics I'm interested in, I am someone who lives with HIV and AIDS. And this is public since that date. And I have taken on more and more of a political as a fight. And the first years with AIDS for me was all about gaining scientific knowledge on my part. I worked with different community organizations, friends and colleagues. We met to face the effects of the social discrimination. And there were many hospital groups arising in Santiago that were also against AIDS, and we had to be very politically active, and that's where I went to a press conference given by Luc Montagnier. Who does not know who Luc Montagnier is? Well, Luc Montagnier is the famous French scientist who discovered HIV, our mother. He won the Nobel Prize for Medicine, and he really brought everyone, got everyone's attention in Chile when he gave his conferences in Santiago on AIDS back in 1995. His visit with the press in our region asked for support for the group of called Mobile, the gay liberation movement in Chile. He supported the fight of countries like ours, and his role made a lot of people uncomfortable. Dr. Chai, who was head of AIDS treatment in Chile, became very involved and finally helped us resolve many of our problems. But we weren't satisfied with all this controversy, and because there was a rightist mayor involved in this conference who caused us a lot of drama and problems, and HIV then began to really harm my life, and AIDS began to appear. And I didn't have a lot of possibilities for medicine, and I was pretty sure that I was going to die, just as many of my colleagues had. And I remember Manuel Rodriguez, who lived in Santiago. He died, and I inherited his therapy. And I've kept on nights and days, good times, hard times, contradictory times. We've had shadows, doubts, fear, alienation, stigma. We've seen the good part of the political struggle on our side. And however, AIDS has taken many lives from us, but we continue to fight. I thank life for having given me so much, and I appreciate what so many of my colleagues have done to open up many new worlds for us to continue fighting, going ahead, making new roads as we journey along. As Maria Elena Walsh says, they killed you so many times, and as many times as you've been killed, you will be revived. And when death finally comes, someone will save you so you can continue singing. Thank you very much.
Y para terminar, este es un
And to finish, you know that the 28th of June is Stonewall, and also in Barcelona. And I'd like to remember that famous political meeting in New York of homosexuals. They wanted to take it on as their own, but the main players were poor transvestites, anarchists, and lots of Latin Americans. So this afternoon, in homage to them, to Silvia Rivera Macha and all the transvestites that accompany us in our struggle.
Ahora nuestro
Well, now our next speaker is Denis Wamala. He is the director of the program facilitators. I can't read it well. Director of Programs Icebreakers Uganda.
Good morning. I'm happy to be in Madrid. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for coming here to honor this conference. Like you've heard, my name is Denis Wamala. I'm from Uganda, and I work with an organization called Icebreakers Uganda. I'm going to make a very brief presentation on what the situation is like for LGBT people who are HIV positive in Uganda, and generally the situation around the legal and cultural issues for LGBT people in Uganda. Thank you. So that's how I've headed my paper. It's just a situation of the LGBT people in Uganda. Go ahead. First, I would like to introduce my organization, which is a care and support organization for LGBT people in Uganda. Icebreakers Uganda was started in 2004, and our main calling or our main mission was to create a family, to create a situation whereby we can support each other as LGBT people. Because we found out that we are going through so many violations, and everyone was living alone. No one had a support system. No one could share their situation and appreciate each other's situation. So we're like, why don't you create a family? Why don't you create something that brings us together? So Icebreakers Uganda started as a family, not as an organization, but as a family of LGBT people who just come together in a house and share their experiences, share their challenges, and help ourselves get solutions. So we developed from a support group to a fully fledged LGBT organization. Our core areas, like you will see in my presentation, is mainly providing support through creating space. We have a house that provides shelter for those who have been violated, those who have been evicted from their houses, those who have been arrested by police and just been given bail. We create that space where people can just walk in and share experiences and feel at home generally outside the very hostile environment that Uganda is. And then we also have programs that educate people on healthy sexual behaviors. Because we realize that while we are talking about HIV, while we are talking about testing and getting all these numbers that all organizations want to have, are we actually explaining to people how they can live a better life sexually? Are we teaching them how they can behave towards each other in a sexual manner that is healthy? That's part of what we do. We also do a lot of advocacy work with government officials, judiciary, with health officials. We try to talk to as many people in the country as possible. And as you might imagine, in Uganda, that's not a very easy thing because everyone looks at you with skepticism. Everyone looks at you as, you have come to tell me about this Western invasion. You've come to try and convince me to accept this unbiblical and African thing. So advocacy in Uganda for LGBT issues is not easy, but we try our best to reach as many people as we can. And of course, we also do research because we want to create as much evidence as possible, because what has happened is over the years we have tried to do our work and we have always been challenged. Where are these LGBT people? Our president once gave a press conference and said in Uganda we don't have gay people. So we don't need any programs to support gay people because they don't exist. So it's through studies that we carry out that we actually produce evidence that we actually exist and we need programs to support us. The country context of HIV is very daunting, more so for LGBT people, because we don't have national data for LGBT people. The government has for long not recognized that LGBT people exist, so it did not bother to collect data around LGBT people. But in a nutshell, the general population has a prevalence rate of between 7 and 8% being HIV positive. That's about 1.4 million people, and Uganda is only a country of about 36 million people. And our own studies and studies by UNAIDS and surveys we have carried out have shown that the prevalence within the LGBT community is twice. So while the general prevalence is at 7.4, the prevalence within men who have sex with men, for example, is at 13.2. So that's twice the average. And that calls for actually twice the effort. But what is happening is that we are seeing zero effort towards a community that has twice the burden of HIV. And of course, with sex workers, it's even higher, 33%. And because culturally, sex work and the LGBT community are looked at as being perverts, being antisocial people, there are no programs that are actually tailor-made to deal with this situation. So it is with figures like this, and these are not figures that are produced by the government, these are figures that are produced by us and with the support of organizations like the World Health Organization and UNAIDS. So it's these figures that we take to the government and tell them, listen, you need to deal with this. If you don't deal with this, it's going to affect the country as a whole. But because mostly just leaders who are extremely powerful would rather that if the scourge is that big within the LGBT community, let's just get wiped away by HIV, and then the country maybe the country will be saved of LGBT people and of this embarrassment of same-sex relations. But to try and explain to them how a figure of, for example, 13.2 can translate into the figure of 7.4 within the national average. Because it's one thing looking at the LGBT community as a community or the sides that you can neglect. But when you explain to them how the LGBT community and men who have sex with men interact with the general population, when you explain to them, for example, that some people are bisexual and some people who are claiming to be heterosexual are actually homosexual and having homosexual activities, then people begin to understand that this figure of 13.2 can actually cross over to their bedrooms and affect them. So it's important for us to have such figures in order to do our work. The context in which we are working, I would like to paint for you the picture in which we do our work. We have a legal and policy environment that is not so different from what you've heard from many African countries, and even like it was mentioned in Pakistan. We have a constitution that clearly says marriage is between a man and a woman. So it clearly prohibits any marriage, any same-sex marriage. But no one in Uganda, in the LGBT community, is asking for same-sex marriage. We're asking for things that are extremely basic. Not to be beaten, not to be arrested, not to be violated. But then we also have the Penal Code Act, which are the rules and regulations of the country, which is something that was carried out of the British colonial rules and just transferred into our current rules. That prohibits canon knowledge against the order of nature, which has been translated as homosexual activities. So when you're trying to advocate, when you're trying to reach out to a community that has been outlawed, that is clearly illegal, you're conspiring to promote something that is illegal. So besides the fact that you are gay yourself, you're actually encouraging, the government translates that you're already committing a crime and you're encouraging other people to commit a crime. That is clearly prohibited within the law. So that's how we are working. So that's why it's easy for us to get arrested all the time, because there's actually a law to arrest us. And then Uganda is a very religious country. We have about 90% of the population Christian and the rest Muslims. But you find that the Christians are extremely powerful. They have huge churches, and these churches build schools and hospitals, and they come with these charities that provide all kinds of support to people with disabilities, to women. These churches have very huge HIV programs. So when the religious leaders come out and say, look, we are the good people here. We are the ones preaching to you the word of God. We are the ones giving you the support for HIV. We are the ones building schools, providing free education. And we are the same for telling you that LGBT people are wrong. LGBT people are immoral. It is very easy for the whole population to believe the religious leaders because they are so powerful. Everyone listens to them, and this is happening every week. So when the religious leaders paint themselves as the custodians of morals in the country, and so they direct people on what to believe and what not to believe, you find that we, as activists, have a very small voice. You have about only 50 activists speaking against a whole population of extremely strong and well-funded religious rights. We currently have support from American evangelicals to evangelicals in Uganda. So they come with all these arguments you hear on the internet and all these campaigns you hear, the anti-gay campaigns going on all over the world. They are now ripe in Uganda because they are being supported and extremely highly funded by their partners all over the world. So the religious forces are a big problem for us because everyone listens to them and they speak with one voice when they speak. Actually, homosexuality is one thing that will put all religions together. You'll find Christians and Muslims arguing on so many things, but when it comes to homosexuality, they will make a joint press conference because they all agree on that, on demonizing homosexuality. That is one of the campaigns I wanted to highlight. That is what a leading evangelical pastor who keeps on running campaigns day in and day out. He's very well funded, and so he keeps on galvanizing university students, schools and churches, and going on the streets with huge numbers of people, up to 100,000 people marching and saying no to homosexuality, no to westernization and stuff like that. We also have the issue of patriarchy. Uganda and Africa generally is a very patriarchal society whereby men are supposed to be men. Men are supposed to be the head of the households. Men are supposed to be macho. So when they look at you as a gay man, they're looking at you as violating the principle of patriarchy. They imagine, how are you having sex? Are you reducing yourself to a woman? If you are an effeminate man, why are you acting like a woman? Why are you disrespecting we, the powerful men? So we need to punish you. We need to put you right back into being the macho man you're supposed to be. So the whole homophobia here in Africa is not about exactly people hating men, but people mainly protecting their masculinity and thinking, if you're a man and you start acting like a woman, then you're threatening our power as men. So they need to fight back. And then, of course, we have the media. Media always influences everything, everywhere. And in Uganda, it's one-sided. Even if you paid the media for an ad, for example, saying, please provide ART to men who have sex with men, and you're paying, they won't take your money. They won't run the ad. But then they will run an article for free condemning LGBT issues. So you find that the media is wholly against you. You cannot find any space. They will give all the space possible to fight you, but even if you pay for space, they won't give it to you to fight back. And so all these issues lead to unreported and undocumented violence against the LGBT community. I would say violence against all minorities, but I want to specifically talk about the LGBT community because that's why we are here today. You find that when you have the law against you, when you have the religious leaders against you, when you have all the heads of institutions against you, when you have the media against you, people are going to violate you, and like one of the panelists say, and you won't even know it's violence. You'll ask someone, have you ever been violated? And they will say no. And then you ask them, have you ever been beaten because you're gay? And they will say yes. Because they don't even think that being beaten is a violation. They believe they deserve it because this is what they have grown up hearing from their parents, from their religious leaders, from the politicians. So they don't even know that it's violence. There's an example of one of the volunteers at the organization I work at who had gone out to do some of our work, and he got badly beaten, and so he was bleeding, and this was just after one of our other volunteers had been killed. So that's ongoing violence that happens every day, and people don't even report it unless you follow them to report it. And then generally, the safety and security of the people who do the work we do. It is very hard to get people to work with us. When people see that Dennis was doing this work and he got beaten and he got killed, how do you convince someone else to come and do the same work? The people need to think of their safety and security. They prefer that if I'm living underground, then I'm safer than if I come out to try and speak about the things, because they've seen evidence of people being beaten, they've seen evidence of people being killed. So they think about their safety and security first, and they would rather not do the work we do. And generally, how do you provide HIV services to a stigmatized community? For someone to come and have a test, for someone to take their drugs and actually stay on their drugs, they need to believe that it's worth it. They need to have that self-worth. But when people are stigmatized, when people believe that they are not worthy of themselves, how do you convince them to stay on treatment? Everyone is telling them they are not worth anything. Everyone is telling them you're worse than pigs, you're worse than dogs, even cows don't do that. How do you convince such a person to take drugs? Because they're already fighting with suicidal instincts. They're thinking, I'm not worth it, maybe I need to move somewhere else, maybe my community doesn't want me, and then you're telling them, no, actually you stay on drugs and you'll be better. It's very hard to get HIV services to a self-stigmatized community. And then, like most of you will know, civil society is a very huge player in promoting the realization of rights, of human rights generally as people, but also for LGBT people. We rely a lot on the civil society. But in a country like Uganda, where the civil society is cautious, you can be deregistered for quote unquote promoting homosexuality. You can be admonished by your church because the organization you lead is promoting homosexuality. The civil society is very cautious. How do they deal with LGBT people? They will tell you, you see, we want to support you, we want to deal with you, but can we do it under the curtains? Because if we don't do it under the curtains, then we also get into trouble. So you find that you don't have enough space, enough support from the civil society. Because understandably, they're looking at their positions and they're trying to fight for their own survival. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the press reports we get. For example, I've been listed so many times in the press. They put your name, they put your place of residence, just to try and to promote violence against you. Like, if you want to know where homosexuals are, so and so is a homosexual, and you can find them here, and then that's how violations are promoted. I have to make this faster because I'm running out of time. I'll just skip some of these things so that I can highlight the main things. So the quest for survival, these are things I've highlighted before. How do people survive in an environment where they have been declared worthless? How do people convince themselves that I can actually do drugs and become someone when they just got thrown out of 5 jobs in 1 year just because they were in a certain press as being gay? Go ahead. So I've talked about the narrowing civil society space. I've talked about the denial of health services, because sometimes people go to a hospital and the doctor says, I cannot deal with a homosexual. They want to test for an STI, you come with your partner, and the doctor is like, I cannot deal with a homosexual. Go find somewhere else where they can promote homosexuality. Go ahead. So we have tried to document, we have come up with our own systems, like the Rights, Evidence, and Action, where we document our own violations. Why are we doing this? So that we can share with the world what's actually going on, and share with the government and tell them why you are denying that these things are not happening. We are being violated. And so we have come up with figures that actually show what is happening, how many violations are going on. So we report these figures. Most figures are not reported, but those that we can, we try to document them and present them to the government, so that even if it denies that violations are going on, we can embarrass them, we can produce these figures on the international forum, and then they have to answer. So what are we doing? We are doing community gatherings. Like I told you, we are a community organization, so we create community gatherings, we mobilize communities in our resource center. We are running the first LGBT clinic in Uganda. which provides free services, and it works 3 days a week. So it provides STI services, HIV testing, it provides treatment, and we are being supported by the International HIV/AIDS Alliance. So it is the first of its kind actually in East Africa, and we are using it as a method of showing the government how it can reach out to LGBT, because most times they say we don't know how to reach out to this community. So we said we shall start a clinic to show you how you can reach out to the community. And because the clinic is in Kampala, which is the capital, we also need to reach out to people who cannot come to the capital. So we have an outreach program. We have an outreach program where we have a van that goes out to the rural areas that are very far from Kampala and provide the same services we are providing at the clinic to provide them also to people outside Kampala, so that we feel that we are a family. Please go ahead. Go ahead. So this is just some of the figures showing you how we do it. We just go out into the community. It's very risky, but we try to paint it that it's something about health. And so the people we are working with will know that we are working with LGBT issues, but the general population will look at us and think, oh, they're just doctors providing treatment, general treatment. And even if you come and you're not an LGBT person, we shall be forced to treat you because we don't want to be seen as only looking for LGBT, because then that puts us at risk. Go ahead. Go ahead. So that is our model basically. How do you brand in, you make it, you paint it as not something only specifically LGBT, but you paint it something generally health, and then know that you're targeting LGBT people. That way you can survive for a couple of rounds or so. It might be very difficult, but at least it's a way of surviving in a difficult situation. That's an example of outreaches. You can see how many people we get when you go. You go to a place and you get hundreds of people lining up and squeezing just to get the treatment, because some of them have even never heard of something like a lubricant. So when you tell them we have blood lubricants, they flood in and we have so many people to work with. And this is our reach right now. We are reaching 14 districts around the country, and we are distributing condoms and lubricants, and we're also doing a lot of sensitization with local leaders. These are the services we provide: ART services, we provide screening, we distribute materials that educate people about sexual behaviors. Of course, we distribute condoms and lubricants. And for those cases we cannot manage, we refer them to partner hospitals that we have come up with. That is a map showing our coverage generally in the country. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. We also train health workers in sexual orientation and gender identity, because most health workers are not trained in school. They have never heard about LGBT issues. So what we are doing is we are retraining them. We go to hospitals and clinics, and this is an example of one of the clinics we are at, just training them and telling them, this is what sexual orientation means, this is what gender identity means, this is how you deal with LGBT people, so that they get that basic information. When a gay man comes to you, this is how you approach them, because they have no information completely. So we're also doing that kind of training. And because we know most people cannot come out to us because of the stigma, we have started an online program that has all the information you can need as a gay man or as an LGBT person in terms of getting your health. I've already talked about this. This is a program where we collect violations and data to present to the government. And so basically that is what we are doing, and moving forward we are trying to expand these programs and make sure that we work in a clandestine way, but also make sure that we reach as many people as possible in an extremely difficult environment. Thank you very much. I'm sorry the time was very little. Thank you.
Bueno, yo creo que ha sido realmente interesante.
I think it's been really interesting, the four speakers, the four presentations we've had. I'm going to move quickly to the questions and answers. We are almost very close to the coffee break. I don't know whether the organizers think to shorten the break, the coffee break. Do you have any questions? Good morning. First of all, I wanted to thank the speakers for telling us about the realities, the community, the LGTB community, what they are experiencing in such different countries. And I want to give them all my support for them to continue with their fight. It's all about time. Here in Spain, we had a very similar situation years ago, very precarious, and we've managed to get many things, and we still have to continue. My question is that I had an experience about 15, 18 years ago when I went to Iran, and when I went to do my visa, I was told that I had to carry with me an HIV test with me, proving that I was positive. If I was going to be there more than 4 weeks, so I was going to be there only 3 weeks, so I didn't do this. And when I was there, I asked, why is this? And I was told that with 3 weeks, one person who goes there is not, they don't expect you to have a sexual relationship. And when I asked this, what about the LGTB community? And I was told that that doesn't exist in Iran. There's no homosexuality. So I wanted to ask you, in your countries, whether there is really, people are asked when they travel there, they have to show whether they are negative or not. Thank you very much.
In Armenia, we did have such a law. However, we changed it quite a while ago. However, I'm one of those victims of such a law. I used to work in a country for over 10 years, and when they find out that you are HIV positive, you get deported as a criminal. So luckily, I actually found out before the governments did. So. But in Armenia, we don't have, we changed it.
Okay, thank you. In Uganda, we don't have such a law. Actually, our government prides itself in being very efficient in fighting HIV. So they try to have as many laws as possible that show them to be internationally proactive in terms of HIV and AIDS. So we don't have such a law.
It's the same there in Pakistan. We don't have such laws where you have to prove that you are HIV negative. We actually have laws that protects the confidentiality of HIV positive people. So if someone discloses your HIV status, you could go to law, and there are measures that will be taken to protect you. And there is no certificate required or proof required that you are not LGBT community. The government recognizes transgender people, and right now there is a process where the government is actually recognizes the MSM behavior as well. So it's a process that may be starting. It is slow, but I think there is some positive development.
Bueno, en Chile no hay.
In Chile, there is not such a law. The system also protects the confidentiality of the person who lives with HIV. The civil society organizations, they try to avoid the discrimination that could be applied. Moreover, Chile right now is like the United States in America Latina, in Latin America. We now have a foundation called Savia, so they give you a lot of information about all the different treatments. So, in Chile, there's no restriction of treatment for people who have been certified of HIV positive. So the state guarantees this treatment, not because they have solidarity with the patients, but because they don't want the epidemic to expand. This is what is understood. So this is a positive aspect, because many people see that these treatments are needed, and in other countries are not guaranteed, only to nationals, you see, but in Chile it's guaranteed for everyone. And they also guarantee shelter. This is our song. So for many partners from Latin America, from other countries who come to us, looking for this shelter. Any other questions? Hello, I'm Rim Roqueta from Barcelona, and I wanted to thank you all the work that you've carried out. I think this work against the HIV virus and work for the rights of the for the collective, for the group, it's a great work. And we have to be clear that the violations have to be denounced, and to fight without reproductive and sexual rights is very difficult. It's very difficult to fight against the epidemic. We are all very tired of so many years, but sometimes my partners tell me, my colleagues, that in the United Nations there are meetings about these rights, and there is a conservative lobby which is very important, and they want to remove our rights. I think it's very difficult to reach these places, but they're actually occupying a space. We have a very hard path to follow. I think we should do something on an international level, because it's impossible that there are some rights in some countries but not in others. We need to try to have a free, more fair world. You can't understand health without rights, and the governments sometimes they don't seem to care about this. We can to reach this lack of rights to an international sphere in order to fight.
Any responses? Well, I would like to say something that we heard yesterday. The agenda, we talked about PrEP, and there was a demonstration in a public entity in Chile. Despite having the guarantee and the treatment and universal coverage, we still have a problem of young people, young adults who don't continue their treatment. And it's a struggle for us. It's hard for us to understand that why there are people who are leaving aside their treatment, saying there's so many pills, but there are also psychological reasons for this. There's systemic burnout, and this is something people don't always realize. And the PrEP, our famous PrEP, and I say famous, it's not famous in Chile. It's really not even on the table for discussion, whether or not it's included in the public services. So much it's that way that I think we're in prehistoric times in Chile. When one demands rights to medicine, such as in our case, the jaguars of Latin America, as we're called, we are not entitled to this. And I would like to say that we need to demand also the right to information. There are many people who don't have information in many countries, even modern countries, developed countries, with media there are lots of people who still don't understand what HIV positive and AIDS are. There are no faces put to those illnesses. There are no recognizable faces, bodies, names, and until you have that, this is just statistics. And statistics really have names behind them, faces. They're people, and they have rights to information, not just scientific knowledge, but political information. And sexual education must be free in schools. It's not just about providing medicines to us. We have to educate our young people from the time they're very small so that they can live their sexuality as they want, but with information and sexual education and public campaigns of prevention and information on condoms and feminine types of preservatives. Well, we need to stop now for our coffee break, but thank you very much, and I also agree with Kim. We've seen in the fight against homophobia and transphobia and etc., how important it is to be able to give a proper response to HIV. I'd like just to make an ad. We're going to present this book, The History of Chile and AIDS in Chile, the 5th of July in Barcelona. We will have colleagues, doctors and scientists from Chile with us, and I'm the author of this wonderful book. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go have our coffee.